I've been really looking forward to this lesson because I think understanding how the Facebook algorithm works is essential to run successful Facebook ad campaigns. So in my opinion, the two things that make Facebook marketing so valuable are the targeting capabilities, especially advanced targeting methods like custom audiences and lookalike audiences, and the algorithm, which is super smart. So to be a good Facebook marketer, you have to be strong on the creative front. You have to be able to create and to select engaging imagery that matches your target audience. And you have to be strong on the data front, meaning that you have to know how the algorithm works and you need to know how to work with the algorithm. And to make that happen, you have to understand a few crucial things about the Facebook algorithm. So here are a few things that you really have to know. The most important thing to understand is that the algorithm is constantly looking for personalized content. Every newsfeed is different. So Facebook is kind of selecting organic posts that you see. You don't see all organic posts, you only see a certain percentage. And Facebook is also handpicking ads that you see. It's trying to match segments of your target audience with a particular ad. And it essentially is trying to create maximum value for both the advertiser and the user. So what you have to remember is that the machine learning algorithm is driven by relevance and efficiency. This has positive implications on the user experience because Facebook tries not to serve irrelevant ads. For example, if Facebook knows you will not be interested in the product, it will not necessarily display an ad advertising that product. Or ads that require a conversion aren't necessarily displayed to users with a history of being a proven non-converter. And the fact that the algorithm is driven by the mantra of relevance and efficiency has also positive implications for advertisers because Facebook is trying constantly to maximize your budget. It tries to give you as many conversions as possible by leveraging your full budget. So that's a really key thing to understand and to be aware of. Number 2, the algorithm works in 2 phases. Phase number 1 is the learning phase. It typically lasts between 3 and 5 days. And phase number 2 is the optimization phase. So in phase 1, the algorithm is exploring the area it tries to learn, and once the algorithm identifies characteristics of a converting user, it switches to exploiting the user base or the target audience that it identified. So for example, let's say you have a sushi restaurant in Berlin and you're just starting out on Facebook and you go really broad, meaning you don't advertise your sushi restaurant in Berlin, but you go after all people living in Germany, meaning 30 million Facebook users. So this wouldn't be a smart decision, but still the algorithm will learn that clicks are coming from Berlin. So it will identify the location Berlin as a user characteristic. And once the data that the algorithm gathered is statistically relevant, meaning it gathered sufficient data, Facebook tries to reach out to users living in Berlin. And it does that with thousands of data points like location. Therefore, the budget suggestion that I have for you is, let's say you can spend $900 on paid Facebook advertising. It's better to spend $100 per day in 9 days than $300 per day in 3 days, because as we figured, phase number one is the learning phase. It lasts 3 to 5 days. So when you spend $300 per day in 3 days, well, great. Facebook learned what a common characteristic is of a converting user, but there is no room for optimizing for that particular audience because you ran out of budget. Number 3, don't panic too quickly. Be patient. Don't draw conclusions about your ad performance for at least 24 to 36 hours from when your ad goes live. The algorithm needs to go through the exploration phase and gather data as we saw before, but there's one exception to that rule. If you see that your campaign or ad set or ad sucks. So let's say you're getting $3 clicks, and that's kind of unusual if you compare that campaign to previous campaigns that you run. Then you can turn off your ad set or ad faster, but if your metrics are slightly off, then I recommend you wait. Number 4, optimization needs data. I'm quoting Facebook here, the algorithm needs sufficient information, and the technical term here is data points. And that doesn't matter what your campaign goal is. So let's say you're running a conversion campaign, you try to gather leads for whatever product. The algorithm needs 3 things to gather a sufficient amount of data, a sufficient amount of information: time, sufficient ad spend, and the right optimization goal. Therefore, you have to allocate enough budget to get 25 conversions per ad set, not per campaign, per ad set in 1 week. A few months ago, Facebook required 25 conversions per day, but the algorithm got better and now you only need to have 25 conversions per ad set in 1 week. If you collect fewer data, then there's no calibration, meaning the algorithm cannot make a distinction between a converter and a non-converter, because no conversions result in no learnings. Guess that makes sense. So if you're not able to gather sufficient data, you have to increase your budget and or change the conversion goal. So for example, if you optimize for purchase in your funnel and the purchase event didn't get enough data, you have to optimize for a different optimization goal that gets more data, for example, add to cart. Number 5, the algorithm doesn't like artificial constraints. Let me give you 3 examples to point that out. If you exclude certain interests, you're telling the machine learning algorithm, hey, that particular interest group will not convert. Algorithm, do not explore that interest group, do not talk to them. So this is something you shouldn't necessarily do in the launch phase, do it in the optimization phase. But the point I want to make is that if you exclude interest, you're telling the algorithm that you're pretty sure that this interest group will not convert. So you're placing an artificial constraint on the algorithm because it cannot explore this segment of your target audience. Number 2, budget constraints. So with daily budgets, the problem is that you're kind of forcing the algorithm to spend, let's say, $100 per day. But here's the thing. In certain niches, especially in the e-commerce space, the weekend tends to be the best time to run Facebook ads. So maybe on the weekend, you're getting way cheaper conversions than on Monday. So with a daily budget, you're placing an artificial constraint that Facebook cannot spread out the budget throughout the week. However, with the lifetime budget, for instance, Facebook can spread out the budget, depending on what day of the week you're getting the best and the cheapest conversions. So, for example, the algorithm may decide to spend the most amount of money on the weekend. And by the way, I just want to let you know about the recent change here. It's a change that many Facebook advertisers are not aware of. If you select daily budget and let's say you want to spend $100 per day, the algorithm can spend 20% more or less on any given day. So it can spend $80, but it can actually also spend more than $100. It can spend $120. Why? Because Facebook wanted to do something about the fact that there are performance differences throughout the week, right? So in order to account for that fact, Facebook made that recent change. And the third example I want to give you why the algorithm doesn't like artificial constraints is if you go for all placements, the algorithm is essentially looking at, okay, so I can serve an impression to your target audience. Where are people spending time at this moment? And it's also looking for the cheapest outcome. So give the algorithm room to explore. Usually that results in cheaper conversions. And the fact that the algorithm doesn't like artificial constraints has the biggest implication on the audience size and the placements. So try to go for big audiences of at least 1 million people in it. Be careful with small audiences that can result in high CPCs. I rising frequency and delivery issues. I know that it's not always practical and not always possible, especially if you're going for niche audiences, but still, if you're going for a mass market, try to go broad. And with regards to placements in the launch phase, try to go broad, go for Facebook, Instagram, and the audience network, and isolate placements not in the launch phase, but in the optimization phase. Quick recap, we covered that already. The optimization methodology depends on the campaign goal. Depending on your campaign goal, you're reaching different segments of your target audience. So the algorithm is essentially always looking at the audience most likely to convert, meaning it includes past user behavior of a user in its prediction. Number 7, avoid changes to existing ad sets. Here's a really basic rule. Never make changes to an existing ad set. The least harmful thing to change is the bid, then the budget, but still learnings get lost if you make changes to a live ad or ad set. However, the worst thing to change is the targeting and changing the creatives, because that resets some of the learnings. And the technical thing that happens here is that the algorithm creates a fresh object ID. So for example, if you want to scale by adding audiences, create a new ad set. So if you need to make changes to the image, the copy, or the audience, always duplicate and relaunch. Never make changes to a live ad set or ad. If you make changes and if you upload ads, do it within the first 3 hours after midnight of the ad account time zone. The closer to midnight, the better. Here's the reason. That's the time when the algorithm starts planning the next day. So it's looking essentially at the available advertising space, the budget allocated per active ad set, etc. So here's what happens if you make changes throughout the day. The algorithm loses some learnings, not all, but some, because it needs to recalculate in the middle of the day. Number 9, create ad sets within existing campaigns instead of creating brand new campaigns. Campaigns are a closed unit, and therefore some learnings are getting transferred from one ad set to another ad set. However, Facebook still treats each ad set separately. So not all learnings get transferred, but just a certain percentage of learnings, a really small portion. Last but not least, never trust the algorithm, because after 500 to 1,000 impressions, it makes a prediction about the long-term performance of your ad. And here's the problem. That decision might not be statistically relevant, especially not with big audiences and small budgets. Therefore, what some marketers do is uploading the same ad set multiple times until you see better metrics in order to account for statistically insignificant decisions. So they upload an ad set multiple times until they see a relevance score of, let's say, a 7 or 8 and a reasonable click-through rate.